It's not a level. All right, we're gonna go ahead and dive in here this morning. We have a quorum and it's 10 o'clock, so we're gonna get rolling. Guess I'll start maybe up there in the corner with Derek Miller and work our way around the room, say who you are and who you represent. We know who's at the meeting today.
Derek Miller, City of Omaha. Michael Snap.
Sharon Beavers, Omaha Metro Transit.
David Stern and DOC. Jared Walker and DOC. Carlos Morales, MAPA. Eric Williams, Popular Energy.
Award Malcolm.
Gordon Barker with MAPA.
Todd Pitzer, Douglas County. Jim Warner with MAPA.
Brian Guy, City of Omaha.
Coach Gibbons, City of McLean. Alex Evans, City of McLean.
Christy Evans, City of Omaha.
Tom Selmer, OBI Creative. Matt Cox, Council Bluffs Public Works.
Joe Susi, La Vista Public Works.
Back here, Jason.
Jason Carvey, HDR.
I have Would you like me to introduce you? Any little concern, Kenny?
Dale Parker, Fetish. Adam Schweitz, Metro Transit.
Part Q, Shimmer. Austin Rouser, City of Omaha. Mark Johnson, City of Omaha.
Elisa Manuel, MAPA. Lindsay Button, MAPA.
Do we have folks that are online that could introduce themselves, please?
Ian McClellan in DOT.
Laura Heilman, MAPA.
John Rasmussen, Potawatomi County.
Jeff Subject, City of Omaha.
John Green.
Close.
Joan Green, ENA.
Okay. With that, we are going to move into our action items. We have 5 of those today. The first one being, anybody want to motion to approve the minutes from the January 17th meeting, or is there discussion prior to that?
I'll make a note that the minutes that went out with the packet were labeled like the December meeting minutes to show that it was a joint meeting with TTAC and MAPA. The January meeting was not. That has been corrected and it will be updated on MAPA's website after this meeting.
Any discussion on those minutes? Is there a motion to approve? I will make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the January meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It is approved. Item B, from Jim Warner, is going to talk about the SS4A draft comprehensive safety action plan.
Thank you, Todd.
You're welcome.
All right, so very excited to bring to you today our draft comprehensive safety action plan. Been at this just under a year. And I think that the team has put together a good product. You've seen 3 formal presentations from the consultant team that really covers a majority of the technical aspects within the plan. We've rounded that up, and I think they put together just a really easy to read document that provides a good background on our safety experiences right now and recommendations for projects and otherwise policy process changes. So as with, I'm sure all of you, the weather has thrown us a couple curveballs this week. We've moved both of our public meetings to next week and the following week. So the ones in blue are rescheduled. They're going to both be at the same locations. We'll be at the Barbara Whites for our first public meeting next Monday, followed up at Council Bluffs Public Library on Tuesday, go to Meadows Community Center in West Omaha on Wednesday, and we'll finish up at the Miller Park Pavilion on Monday, the 3rd of March. The related online public meeting has been open since Tuesday of this week. We're excited to share that. Please go through it. There's a couple opportunities to provide feedback. We would like this committee to give us continue to give us feedback as well as the public. So you'll see an opportunity to really, I think, provide some very focused feedback or locations in your communities if you would like to do so. So really high level, we're bringing you the project recommendations, the project prioritization, and our safety policies and strategies we're recommending for adoption by each local member jurisdiction, acknowledging that each jurisdiction is going to take these as it fits their community best. Go to the next slide, please. And just in summary, this draft comprehensive safety action plan public comment period is planned to go through the 24th of March, at which point they'll take all those comments and bundle it up and put it into a final plan to be provided in April, and we'll work with all of you to bring this to your city councils or county boards for adoption. Really kind of a followed with that, we'll go out to each of you and talk to leadership as you would like us to bring the plan and get your feedback as well. In parallel, we'll look to be developing 3 rounds of grant funding, everything from the Safe Streets through local HSIP, if there's an interest in developing an HSIP application for implementation and other local funding sources as well. Then we'll be working with communities to identify those opportunities here in the coming weeks. Any questions from me? All right, thank you. If not,
So are we voting to approve that draft plan? Is that what the action is? Okay.
yeah. So, or I'm sorry, take the next slide.
Oh, there we go. Very good. Are there any questions on this item, first of all? Not seeing any hands up. So is there a motion to approve this draft comprehensive action plan?
So
We have a motion. I will second that. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. We have an approved motion to approve the safety action plan. Jim is going to stay on deck here with item C. That's the National Multimodal Freight Network.
Thank you, Todd. Go to the next slide. Please. All right, a lot of bullet points here. The National Multimodal Freight Network came out of the FAST Act. An interim network was presented in 2016. Really not a whole bunch of action taken on that until an office was created in the U.S. Department of Transportation. And last April, there was a Federal Register item that looked for feedback from communities on how are we going to use this, how are we going to assign additional mileage to the network. And we're currently in another Federal Register review period for the draft multimodal freight network through next Thursday. So it's only a 45-day period. That doesn't work well with the periodicity that we have for TTAC and our board. So I've reached out to a number of the jurisdictions that would be impacted and go through the details, but really kind of high level. This is a planning network. There isn't currently any implication, any impacts on the National Highway Freight Network and the funding that's associated with it. Go to the next slide, please. So a couple of things that they're looking for. Really, what USDOT is looking for is a good understanding of where our multimodal places are, whether that's highway to rail, marine ports, waterways, and airports, and taking stock of basically what's the need nationally and where does that network need to go. So we've been asked to work with both Nebraska and Iowa Department of Transportation if there are recommendations for updates or changes, primarily to the highway network. That was the most impactful for our region. And if there is anything that we would like MAPA to take forward, we'll talk about what a couple opportunities are there. Go to the next slide. All right, so big picture, focusing on the highway network. It took in the strategic highway network. That's in addition to the National Highway Freight Network and then all of the primary highway freight system segments. So it looks like the National Highway Freight Network, along with some connectors that get traffic to Offutt Air Force Base. And then they took a look at some metrics. So looking at volume of trucks on the roadways and also through a model that USDOT has put together, modeled freight volumes on those networks as well. And they considered our critical urban corridors. You'll remember over the past couple of years, we brought to you some recommendations and we've made those and brought them forward. Long story short, none of ours were brought into the network, but we do have opportunities in the future. We would like to reassess and bring those forward. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Would you shift over to the story map? So all of you should have seen this story map. We'll go through. It's a little clunky. Sorry. So each of you have this, and we can make sure to send it out with the minutes as well, but this just provides a real quick snapshot. You just scroll down a little bit of board.
It's just a little slow.
Yeah, yeah. So some background on how it was established. Nice video from our drone operator. And really just wanted to give a quick opportunity to show what the network is and how it could be produced. This first one shows those factors. So this is the truck volumes that meet the criterion in the network designation, and then the blue and the green is sharing what was and what is. So if you slide that slider all the way to the left. What's in green is what's forwarded for recommendation to the highway portion of the National Multimodal Freight Network. If you slide back over. I misspoke, I'm sorry. The blue is what's forwarded and the green is what's the actual existing National Highway Freight Network. So you'll see it just adds Highway 75 south of I-80 and I-480 and a portion of Harvell Drive to get to what's the small gate access, typically north gate to the top of Air Force Base. Thank you for that, Court. Now I see that. So really, I spoke with the City of Omaha, got some feedback from City of Council Bluffs, and presenting for Bellevue, there are folks here, just a recognition that those portions of the network were signed just based upon the rules that they set. And go to the next slide. Another item here, looking at airport, the 2022 statistics for airport freight didn't end up with Everly Airport being over the criteria. 2023 does, and NDOT is working with them to look to see if that can be designated on the network as one of the air multimodal resources as well.
Do you know what attributed to that? It looks like a fairly significant change in that 1 year for the airport.
I didn't do anything more than just calculate the numbers. So,
Okay.
But it is it is a pretty significant increase. Or maybe decrease otherwise. I don't know. Yeah, I've not weighed out any of the changes to the other airports themselves. Okay. So in summary here, these are the three things that they were looking for feedback from stakeholders. The top one is most relevant. There are a number of segments on the primary highway freight system that are, I would say, legacy. They went to rail features that no longer provide multimodal freight. Burlington Station, for example, being one that resulted in 13th and 14th and Leavenworth Street. So those were the ones that I did talk with the City of Omaha, and I don't know if there's any further interest. I would say generally with the short turnaround that we have, just a little less than a week to get a response, and the fact that MAP is looking to conduct a regional freight study to really look at all of these things in detail. Staff recommendation would be that we just accept the draft National Multimodal Freight Network as it is, acknowledging that we would be interested in and very ready to support any coordination with Nebraska and Iowa Departments of Transportation. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Again, are we?
So
we're
we'll go to the next slide.
Okay. So we are looking for a motion to recommend this from MAPA Board to accept the draft. So a motion for that.
So moved.
Have a motion. I'll second that. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. We have approval on that. Court is now going to present amendment 4 to the 2025 tip.
Well, I'll take y'all through it. If you're in the room, you should have the prints out too. You grab one off of the table. So originally, this was going to be entirely the Omaha changes. NDOT had a project change. Added to well, so I've got that on this. So most of what we're doing with for the City of Omaha projects is City of Omaha submitted another AC resurfacing package, so the 2027 Major Street resurfacing package. And they had two projects that were basically, they were just listed in there as placeholders. So they were holding funding that Omaha had designated that they wanted to use to take a couple of other projects through the AC resurfacing program. So those two projects have been removed to the tip, and all of that funding has been added to the Omaha 2027 Major Street resurfacing project. So we've basically programmed right about 8 million in local funding that will end up being returned as about 6.5 million of STBG MAPA in 2028 as part of the AC conversion. So they'll do the actual resurfacing, their local funding in 2025 or 2026, and then we'll reimburse them in 2028. And then NDOT had they are changing the parameters of project on N36 from 132nd to N133. They're basically decreasing the amount of funding in there from 13.8 million to 3.6 million. They're shortening the length of the project, so it won't be the full extent of what the project was.
When did you get that number from them?
When?
Yeah.
Last Friday, Thursday, Friday. It was fairly recent. Yeah.
I thought that number was closer to 5.
I can double check.
Okay.
It came from
Jamie.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
double check with Jamie too, if that's the case, because I know we were balancing around that project, and when the estimate came in recently, it kind of blew up our allocation more than we were anticipating,
Oh, okay.
and I have a number of 5 million stuck in my head.
So that's the federal cost. That's not the total cost. That's just the federal aid side. So
Oh,
it would be
yeah,
closer
if
to 5.
that's the case,
for-
yeah, it's
For
the
the total, but I can double check it too, yeah, if you want to check.
No, that's, yeah, if that's the 80%, if that's the federal.
That's
I
the
think
80%.
Okay. That's probably right then.
And then in addition to that, we are adding a discretionary award to the TIP, North 19th Street Streetcar Extension, TOD implementation. So they're, City of Omaha applied for discretionary funding to do planning for a potential streetcar extension. So that is, we're adding that award to TIP as well. And we're requesting a recommendation to the board to approve this next week.
Omaha, says extension, so can you tell me more about that project? I'm just interested.
Derek, you want to?
Yeah, so we did a quick evaluation of multiple extensions, and this funding opportunity came up, so it's looking at a north extension, further evaluating that 19th Street extension that we landed upon. Look at other extensions and then start to develop a TOD policy code for that area.
So wrapping back around Cuming Street from 10th up to 19th, or it's extension of the existing of the in-process line.
Right.
How's it connect to the existing line then?
On 19th Street.
19th all the way down?
Yeah, I can send you a map.
Okay.
Like,
All right, yeah, there's some other stuff I've been looking at in the area. So I'm just
oh yeah,
curious.
there's a lot going on.
Okay.
Now.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve this? Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Must be the cold weather. You guys are a little heavy. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Four motion or item is approved. We have one more action item. We'll go back to Jim on the truck and travel time performance measures mid-period target updates.
All right, if anybody needs to brush with the copy, go ahead. I'll go as quickly as I can. So we've been establishing and setting this target for 6 years now. This is a 4-year performance period where the mid-year period, Nebraska and Iowa Departments of Transportation have evaluated and reset a number of their targets in last year, October of last year. So this is our opportunity to provide to you an assessment of where we're at and make any recommendations on changes to the targets themselves. So again, the measures on the left, we're looking at all vehicles on the interstate, all vehicles on the non-interstate national highway system. and then the truck travel time reliability, which is a ratio instead of a percentage. Go to the next slide. Real quick snapshot of what this is and what we're trying to do with it. We're looking at reliability, and all that is a ratio for segments along the entirety of the network of an 80th to a 50th percentile travel time for truck and travel, or all vehicles, and then for trucks themselves, it's a 95th and 50th percentile travel time. So in the upper right, just an example, this is the actual speed data pulled from the system, the probe data that we receive. And so when we did a lot of major construction on I-80, Interstate I-80 going eastbound at the bridges, if you recall that, at 42nd Street, it basically stretched out that travel time. Took longer to get where you were going, but there was less variability. So there wasn't all those jumps and starts. Correspondingly, the following year, and still kind of recovering from COVID, when we had still continue to have higher speed traffic on the interstate, you kind of see that peak rises up and it narrows up. So that's what we're talking about. We're again only measuring a ratio, a difference between two travel times. Go to the next slide. So this is the network shown in blue, of course, is our interstate system, and then the green is that portion of the national highway system, which is measured. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to roll through each of the measures separately. So we took a look at what we were seeing for trend lines at the time that we measured and set targets. We were actually trending to a point where we were going to get to 100%. We realized that's not realistic, and with very high level look at using the data as it's provided, we threw a trend line out there and said what we were seeing generally was that construction was the driver of travel time reliability issues, and so we set those targets accordingly. We're actually measuring and reporting on 2023. Just due to the nature, we get 180 days to do this. We have the opportunity to look at 2024 data, so we've shown that there. And I would say 2024 is unexpected. Not any real reason to understand that. And so we took a little deeper look in the trends. So go to the next slide. This is the monthly data that's provided. It's just a number that's thrown in the graph. We call it the easy button. So pulling out and understanding what exists under there at the monthly level is something we've not pulled out yet, but we do look to do with some new staff that we brought on to bring in and take a look at this big data perspective. But this is the numbers as presented to us. And if we go to the next slide, really something that getting ahead of myself, just the areas in yellow are greater than 1.5. So that's that ratio level of travel time reliability. 1.5 or greater means that segment is deemed to be unreliable. So yellow or red segments are unreliable. We'll zoom in a little bit closer on the next slide and kind of show it. So again, the metric is travel time. It's hard to comprehend that, so I've turned it into speed. So the number on the top is that unreliable travel time, or in this case, at 80th percentile travel time, translated to speed, and then on the bottom is that 50th percentile. So you'll note, well, speeds do lower, especially on the eastbound segments of I-80, and then you come around the curve as well at the I-680 interchange. And eastbound, only looking at PMP, a majority of the segments failed in the PM period. There were a couple that failed outside of that, Council Bluffs in particular. And of course, that was really just a fact that we're measuring a system that was under construction. So looking at the trends, I'm not shared this with you previously, but we anecdotally thought we were seeing this over this entire period. Really that speed along the interstate has increased. This is averaging all of our ranges. So that's short segments of 70 miles per hour on 80, majority being 65 miles per hour. And then some of your shorter sections that slow down on I-480 and I-680. But across the board, looking at the entirety of the system year over year, we do see increases in those 50th and 80th percentile travel time speeds year over year. Wanted to give a sense too of the magnitude. On the lower right is the percentage of BMT that's unreliable on the interstate. So anywhere from 0 in 2020 to just about 4% this past year. And then, as we're focusing on safety, just a quick snapshot of fatalities here in the upper right on the interstate system. And a caveat there, that's only the system that we're measuring with our safe streets, so that doesn't include the rural portions of Iowa, our MPO. Any questions? I've been talking a lot. Okay. Similar process for the next two targets, hopefully go quicker. So the non-interstate NHS, like the interstate, we saw things we didn't expect. This is also unexpected. We've basically shown, we're showing with the measurements that we give you, we're stating that these segments are becoming more reliable over time. Might argue, and so might the traveling public, that that's not necessarily the case. We'll break that down a little bit more on the next couple of slides. So this is a little bit different, you know, definitely seeing those monthly variations year over year, but we did see from the summer onward basically travel getting better during the monthly periods. And if we go to the next slide, this is really hard to look at. We'll zoom in a couple spots, but again, yellow and red being unreliable segments on the network. This one's a lot harder to do. The system tries to look at intersections and pull out data, not allow those intersections to bring segments down. I've filtered out all the intersections here because frankly, you just see a bunch of red dots at a lot of the major intersections. So as a tool to look at segment or corridor speed, it is challenged, but it is a good tool. I didn't mention on the previous one, but in the lower left too, just showing those time periods that these evaluations do occur. Okay. This is a lot messier. The point I'd like to make here is right now, as the segments are defined and the tool measures speed, it doesn't take into account speed limits. A number of these corridors of segments that we're evaluating may have speed limit changes across them. So it is harder to see, and it doesn't give the ability to pull out and say a segment may be deemed unreliable, and some of it might be because the majority of the traffic is going at or above the speed limit to begin with. So one could evaluate what reliability means at that point. Next slide, please. Again, a little breakout here in the lower left is the unreliable mile. Again, is a percentage of BMT. The mileage that we're giving through the system, what's conflated, basically has changed quite a bit year over year. So I just showed that in the green. So the blue is that percent of BMT that's unreliable, and the green is the corresponding mileage on the system. In the upper right, fatal and serious injuries is a percent of the total, and then just showing what we already know and what the plan will illustrate, but the yellow line is that percent of BMT. So basically we're having overrepresentation of fatal and serious injuries on our non-interstate national highway system. Okay, finally, finishing up with travel time reliability. This is just a ratio. We don't bring into you know, we're only evaluating reliability of the segments themselves. We're not looking at individuals in those vehicles. Next slide. Not as much variability month over month. Next slide. And this is the system that this has worsened. We always see those areas of I-680 southbound and kind of all that traffic coming in and through that I-680 I-80 interchange. Next slide. And just for example, again, showing those speeds that we see trucks seeing. Again, showing the PM peak period. This isn't as distributed as well. There are plenty of time periods, sometimes even in the overnight, where these segments are unreliable. So it's hard to pull it out. I think it's really just driven by, I guess, weather's a big factor here as well. All right. So again, trends, speeds increasing over time, where PM peak is really the only area where we're seeing those 95th and 50th percentile widening out, and then just trying to show up representative across the whole in the upper right, unreliable lane miles by year as a percent of total. Okay, next slide, please. So we show this wrap up each time. Basically, we didn't meet our target, or we're not better than baseline in any case. So that shows that our reliability is worsening year over year. Showing that second column from the right is our previous targets. We're recommending changes to the 4-year targets for the interstate and the truck travel time reliability index. Both of those are just taking a look at what we're seeing for that linear trend over time and resetting that target to that trend line, absent really kind of any other information to base those targets on. These will again go to board. I didn't write up a nice recommendation, but we would look for a recommendation from TTAC for approval of these PM3 targets and recommendation for approval to the board. We package these up with the other targets that we sent last month and send them off to the Departments of Transportation, Federal Highway Division offices.
Okay, are there any? Sorry,
I'm done.
Right now. Are there any questions?
So based on the updated data, we missed the target and the recommendation then is to just change the target.
Yeah, I think to understand where we're at, I think that's not all that we're doing. We're absolutely trying to take a deeper look at that data. This is big data. We don't bring all of that index data in and look at it right now. We do want to do that. We're also looking more at other sources such as streetlights. So just to get a better understanding of what the data shows us. Absolutely something we would want to refine and bring into trips, for example, to be able to do more detailed analysis of the reliability and congestion related to project selection.
Yeah, and
we're not ready to do that right now.
I know the accuracy or the more accurate data is only a few years back in time, so understandable that continuing to update targets is a good strategy moving forward. But at some point, I mean, it's just going to translate to other recommendations or changes in the system that are not just continuing to adjust the target to make sure that we meet the target.
Yeah, no, I understand your point. Absolutely. In this case, having nothing else to base a reason to go off of, it seemed like a way to acknowledge what we're seeing as changes on the system.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't disagree with that. I'm just interested in what we intend this data to help us do in the future. Other than just saying this is where we were, and so the target is now adjusted to make sure that we are close to the target. I mean, you know, it seems like other actions would be warranted based on the type of data that we're getting. So when do we translate from adjust the target to adjust the actions to get to the target that we want?
So I think from a freight perspective, absolutely, our freight study looks to identify that we're only measuring freight on the interstate system when we know there are other factors that we need to address with freight movement in our region. So I think that would be one of them. Again, we need assistance in looking at all that data and making sound recommendations. That's a start. The other one of trips, again, we're only evaluating a fairly minor portion and we're only looking, this is a limited look at reliability. And, you know, I kind of pointed out, we would definitely want a more robust network that looks at speed limit data that factors in crashes alongside congestion and travel time reliability and makes a comprehensive recommendation for project changes as opposed to just looking at reliability on the system.
Yeah, I was just gonna, if you didn't mention freight, I was gonna mention this is kind of a key part of why we're recommending and have recommended the state for the regional freight plan. In addition to kind of continued work on the traffic incident management, TISMO, systems management, what can we do to alleviate some of these issues that we know are occurring out of those interfacial systems? But this is the data that we're given to evaluate. And as Jim alluded to, especially on the non-interstate piece, the network changes. So like what roads are included changes on a recurring basis. And so it's difficult to understand with this data how we make it useful. That's why we're going deeper on some of these other ones.
Thanks for the additional comment. Sure.
And I think one of the other things, is not that unreliable. Over 90% is a very good number for reliability. 1.3, very good number. So in comparison to other states, other regions, other more densified locations, those numbers would A, be lower, right? And B, that truck travel time reliability index would be much higher. Meaning there's more hyper congestion in these denser networks than what we are experiencing here within this region. So the fact that less than 10% is unreliable throughout a 24-hour period is still a really good number.
We do have some limited improvements on I-80 with regards to MDIS as well. Some of our projects that we have in the system right now. 80 is probably on the back burner a little bit with some of our studies. We have some more thorough projects on 680 in the works, but 80 is gonna struggle.
Okay, good discussion. Is there any more discussion on questions? So we are looking for a motion to approve this. And I guess pass it on to your board, correct? Correct. Okay. So is there a motion to approve or presentation to the board on these targets?
So moved.
Second. Got a motion and a second. Joe and Derek, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That's the end of our action items. We're going to jump into discussion items and good friend Evan Schweitz, who I think is hiding in the back of the room, is going to present Metro Transit.
Would you like the keyboard?
I'll just Vanna White you. So you can go to the next one. Okay. So Metro's mission is to connect people, places, and opportunities through quality transit services. We have a strategic plan called Metro Next that kind of outlines how we plan to do that over the next couple of years leading to 2030. And we're kind of excited to share a milestone, project that's moving forward. Next slide. Our current service types that we offer is rapid transit, fixed route, and paratransit. And microtransit is something a lot of other cities are doing to kind of fill that kind of mid-sized transit gap in the community. So we're looking at doing a pilot project in our community that would be adding this new service type. So in terms of how that would work, a lot of people kind of imagine it as like an Uber type of transit system. It's not quite, because it obviously it's going to be a shared trip. It's not like a personal taxi. It won't pick you up at your house and take you directly to your destination. It basically takes your A to B trip request and groups that with other people traveling generally the same places, but you may have to walk a couple blocks to get to the pickup point as well as from drop off points to that thing. And the algorithm is going to steer you towards a fixed route to the extent that it can. So typically this means you may start with microtransit vehicle and get plugged into a transit center where you can connect with another route. The app is going to be available in English and Spanish at a minimum. And so most of the features will happen through the phone. That's how the payments will be taken as well. The fleet will be accessible, not 100% of all vehicles, but enough so that we can ensure that anyone with a mobility device experiences the same quality of response times as anyone who doesn't have one. In terms of funding, originally in Metro Next, this was kind of put on the list of dream projects that we didn't have money for. But luckily some local philanthropic organizations approached us and said that they had heard of a need for this type of a system and wanted to partner with us to try it out. So they've committed to a 3-year period. And during that time, we'll be able to kind of iterate what's working and what's not, so that we can kind of determine to what extent we want this to be brought in as a full service type in the future. Right now, we're looking at charging $3 per ride. And we're still kind of looking into the specifics of how that would work for folks that continue on to a bus trip. The service hours generally mirror when a lot of our fixed routes are on the street. So Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Saturdays, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sundays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So it kind of mirrors a mid-level route schedule. We've got many routes that run later than that or start earlier, but this, like I said, is kind of geared towards filling in those gaps in some areas of our community that we think it's going to be an important action. So the zones that we're looking at right now is to pilot it in 3 areas: North Omaha, West Omaha, and South Omaha. The North Zone will go from Cuming Street, so our office is here, down to 13, and then it follows Radio Highway to 52nd, and then up basically all the way to Morgan Bridge Road and I-680. And then east towards the river includes all the area in between. So for that zone, if anybody wanted to book a trip that starts and ends within that area, it would likely be fulfilled by one of those vehicles completely. Unless there's an obvious fixed route that it can be plugged into. And then for that zone specifically, there's a couple of additional sites that we want to recognize. One is the 33rd and Dodge Orbit Station, Open Door Mission, and Hefley Airport. So those sites, even though they're outside of the boundary, are still eligible to pick up a drop-off points. And so the intention of that is to kind of plug into orbit so that people can get faster trips across town. And then obviously the airport and Open Door Mission are sites that we expect to be high volume requests. For the west zone, it'll serve the West Roads Transit Center and basically go from Maple to Center all the way out west to 144th Street, including the new West Farm development at Applied Parkway. So that's the little area that kind of dips here past 144. The south zone is from 72nd and includes Bergen Hospital, Walmart, and the Exarban area, and then comes down to Harrison, and then east of 13th, and it does include the zoo, and then any areas south of I-80. So again, the goal is to kind of fill in some of those gaps where fixed routes can't address every need, and kind of plug people into a transit center that can get them in to the rest of our system. So, for example, if someone lives out here in West Omaha and they wanted to go downtown for a great game, the microtransit can pick them up, take them to West Roads, they can get on orbit and continue downtown. Next. So next steps for this process, we held some public meetings over the past month or so that really allowed us to bring in some feedback that we can incorporate into the contract, which we intend to take to our board either this month or next. So once that contract is awarded to the vendor, they will fully operate service. So it won't be our drivers, it won't be our vehicles, but it's all basically a turnkey contract. So once we have that vendor secured, then we can identify a reasonable startup time. In our RFPs, we made it clear that we want to get this going as quickly as we can. Most of them said a few months would be all it would take to get it on the street. So the plan is to begin service later this year, and we're really excited to see where it goes. So I can answer any questions that anyone may have. Otherwise, that's all I got.
So Evan, you've got a new board now in the new calendar year, and Metro Next had some sort of future service improvements and extensions and things that you were looking at. How do you see this fitting into that, or how's your board kind of thinking about this pilot and those future service changes?
Yeah, I'd say it's still at an early stage where we're not really sure. One of the exciting things about this is the ability to kind of turn it on and see the results and learn from it. So we're excited just to see what new patterns emerge of where people are traveling, and if there's obvious route adjustments, or if there's a clear pattern of people always making trips along the same corridor, then we may switch that to a fixed route service, for example. So I think everyone's really excited to learn from the process and just kind of be open-minded in terms of how it will unfold.
Yeah, there's lots of low-income people outside your zones. Are they just SOL?
Well, like all projects, you have to cut the line somewhere, and that's kind of dictated by the money that we have for the 3-year period. So although it would be great to extend the service across the entire region, the budget really doesn't allow for that. So we tried to start with the most obvious needs that we were aware of in those zones where we could plug them into routes. So we didn't want to go too far from our existing services because that would affect response times. So that's kind of how the zones were developed, and it can always change over time depending on how the project goes.
Have you selected a vendor?
We have done the RFP process, and we're in the process of negotiating with the top responder. So if that contract doesn't go through, then we would go to the next vendor on the list. That makes sense.
Is that process of selecting a vendor or top rating of top, is that public information?
Not necessarily. No.
I mean, the contract would be approved by your board.
Yes.
So that's kind of public and open and available to anyone to attend. So as far as that's concerned, yeah, that would be kind of public once the contract goes through.
Yeah, but in terms of like other vendors that applied and how they range with sharing time.
And then how much lead time will you need if you want to use the service in advance of the trip? You have to get in your request when it comes.
So it's pitched as like an on-demand service. So you could be sitting here, book a trip, and it would tell you how soon a vehicle could get to you. So that doesn't mean it's gonna be instant, but you can request it anytime.
Could you pre-book trips, like,
We
say I
did,
want to leave at 10 AM, whoops, missed that one.
yes, so we did specify in our RFP that we wanted the ability to like pre-book trips or even have recurring, like every day I go to work at 8, I just want a vehicle ready for me. So not all vendors are able to offer the same features, but we made it clear what we wanted it to be capable of.
Are you at liberty to say who the donors are?
It's a group of donors, and I don't know if I feel comfortable sharing all of it. Very generous people that typically do a lot of work.
The newspaper said the Sherwood Foundation.
There you go. The newspaper can share it. It's in there.
And finally, just the integration from the app to the fixed line, so you paid for your trip through the app, and then would you have to pay again to ride the fixed route?
So it kind of depends. Most likely there will be some clunkiness because it's a standalone contract that's only operating with one type of service. And so trying to get them to integrate with all the existing stuff that we have would be a challenge. So we've had early conversations where the two, like our current app, UMO, that allows our payments, they say they're compatible. Everyone always says that until it comes time for the details.
The salespeople say.
Right, yeah. And the tech people in the back are like, of course it's not gonna work. But, yeah, so we'll make it as smooth as, or as seamless as we can.
So instead of paying $20 to park over here in Creighton for any of the games or wherever, it would be less than $5 to get from West O to get. Cool.
Will there be any ability to put a bicycle per se onto the micro transit to then take it to a fixed line?
That was something that we asked in the RFP, because bike trips are pretty popular on our bus system. So a lot of our riders are already accustomed to bringing a bike with them. It's one of those details yet to be worked out in the contract, whether each of their vehicles would also have a bike rack. Any other questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Evan. Next item is item G, and Jim Bonner's back to send candidate list for the agent.
Last one, I promise.
Right.
Okay, last month we talked to you about the PM2, the pavement bridge condition. I offered that we would then follow up with Nebraska Department of Transportation provides through their Transportation Asset Management Plan a process to give NDO or each of the metropolitan planning organizations that have off-system or local NHS, the RPO, which is us in Lincoln, information about our roadways and using that system, proposed set of candidate projects. So generally, this was fairly recent data. I do realize that those jurisdictions that are in this group don't have this data yet. So following this meeting, I'll be sharing this with you, but the outputs tabular, it says here are these segments as that optimization program recognized using the Nebraska's serviceability index data, and it makes a recommendation of projects over a 10-year period. So first round of projects starting in 2026 as proposed by this system, again, not to have anything to do with your actual program projects. And the majority of these next 2 years are really kind of looking at the legend on the right, rehabilitation, resurfacing the concrete surface roadways. So I've worked through and kind of pulled out, again, another busy chart, but these are the extent of the roadways, in a couple of cases. These are done on a directional basis, so a couple of them had year split. I've taken the liberty of just kind of combining those. Harrison Street in particular to the south. And I think Ames Avenue in the upper right had different directions between 26 and 27, but I've just illustrated them. So this is one piece of information that we have that can help each of the member jurisdictions plan the national highway system. Of course, it's on our priority network. We'll be talking more about this as we get to our metropolitan transportation planning. But again, it's one piece of that puzzle. We look to, always working with our Department of Transportation counterparts with Nebraska Department of Transportation in particular. We're just looking at being able to share this linear data or making it more accessible in anything assigned to the roadway. So we're working with them. Crash data, here's an example of how we're looking to make this data more available and incorporate it into our planning and eventually our project prioritization processes. Any questions on the candidate project list? Also provided with this is bridge data. Bridge data is a little bit more tricky to present. It doesn't provide a project timeline and recommendation. It's more a summary of recommended improvements. In a lot of cases, it's providing waterproof membrane and some along with some surface treatments that are kind of best practice that didn't exist on kind of some of our older bridges. So but both of those data sets, Excel spreadsheets, I'll share with the member jurisdictions that are have roadways or bridges system on the NHS.
Questions on that one?
On the previous slide, the concentration of resurfaced asphalt between 28 and 32, I would say is noticeable.
Yeah.
What led to then the first 2 years, a big pile up the next 5 years, and then none.
So I would say it's just a function of the age and the existing condition of those roadways. These big peaks in 26 and 27 are taking those roadways that are existing as concrete structures, and basically they past that useful life of the optimization would say, hey, it's time to resurface so you don't get to failure of those road ways. And then really that mid period is kind of maintaining, things that were already built as asphalt, or they have become, they were resurfaced basically, and they are due another resurfacing to keep their useful life extended. And that's a generalization. I don't sit and watch and run the program, but the optimization program does come up with those recommendations.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'm curious about the storage and storage segments.
Yep.
We have the project of the map of the repair service. Those segments from there. Is the duplication of that?
So this is just recommendations from the optimization tool itself. This isn't anything that's coming through a program mechanism to say here a project you should do. There is something on the back end that is useful though, at least especially if you do use local funding for projects on the NHS to provide that information back to the DOT so they're aware that those improvements they'll be caught eventually, but the trucks don't drive every year on those systems. So that will be something that I'll probably ask to inventory, ask for an inventory from all of you points.
So this is part of, Jim highlighted, performance measure rulemaking number 3 today with the reliability. And number 2 is this pavement condition, bridge condition piece. The states have to set targets for the entire NHS, including those parts that are locally maintained by jurisdictions. And so as part of that, the state gives us a list of projects that they think are priorities out of this kind of management of the NHS as a whole. That's what this is. These are recommendations, but as you alluded to, there are other programmed projects, things that don't touch federal funding that might be impacting these corridors. This is just really a way of, through that sort of data-driven process of understanding what pavement and bridge needs are now, where those opportunities, what those types of interventions look like. So it's a candidate list, I think is the right way to ask.
Any other questions or discussion on this item? Okay. We are now on item H, which is our opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to make a comment, now is your time. Okay. Item I, Court is going to walk us through a call for projects application summary.
Yes, so back in October, we opened a call for projects for the 2026 TIP. This is a list of all the applications received. I'm not planning on going through it line by line. There was a link was included in the agenda to a web map that makes it a little bit easier to go and actually look at what these projects are and where they are, and it's got all the kind of funding request information all kind of baked into there, so it's a little bit easier to go through and look at the applications on there. But I will give all of you a quick summary of what we received per program. We got 4 STBG applications. Reminder that this was only on the Iowa side. The Nebraska program is pretty full, so we did not issue a call from the Nebraska side. But we got about just under 13 million in requests on the Iowa side. And then from for STBG, and then for TAP and CRP, we got 2 applications from Iowa, 7 from Nebraska jurisdictions, totaling about 13 million in federal aid. So we'll be putting all of this together, and it's currently in all of this is open for public comment right now. The applications are up for public comment, and we'll take any public comments that we receive, and as well as we'll go through and score all of the projects, and we'll present that information to the Transportation Alternatives Program Committee and Project Selection Committee for recommendations that will ultimately come back to this body and then move on to the board later on this spring and summer with a target of approving the final tip in June. I basically just wanted to give everybody kind of a high level, look at what applications we received, how much we're talking about. On the SDBG side, there is room in the program for these projects, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit more at the PROSCOM meeting. And I believe the same is true for TAP and CRP. I don't believe that these requests will go over what we've got, at least through 2031, which is kind of the final year of the 2026 tip. So there should be funding enough to do all of these projects if the committees decide that they're worth pushing forward with recommendation. Any questions right now? Kind of on that high level. We'll be back with more information. That's all I've got.
Court. Jim? You said you
I'm
were
done.
You are?
I'm done.
I've got item K.
Oh, I'm gonna let Mike get it.
Yeah. Handing off. So we have a surprise presenter. State and federal policy updates.
Well, we got Carlos with the quarterly.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I skipped on. My bad. Item J, sorry, Carlos. Item J, Carlos is gonna present quarterly federal aid, regional federal aid center. Sorry about that. Court.
Oh, okay, so I'm gonna.
All right, I'm not sorry anymore. MAPA guys are missing.
So what we're looking at here is the first quarter of FY federal fiscal year 2025. Just kind of giving you a rundown of what's available on the Iowa and Nebraska sides for Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. You'll see there's a negative number on the obligated through for Nebraska. That's because there were some de-obligations on some projects. Basically, they didn't end up spending all the funding, so it comes back to the pool. So that leaves us with about 22.5 million in Nebraska and 19.2 million in Iowa for the balances. And then below that, you'll see a list of projects that are currently in the implementation year 2025 of the TIP. They're all yellow right now because none of them are obligated, but I don't have any reason to believe they won't be obligated at this point. But as we get into quarters 2, 3, and 4, I'll update that list to kind of show you which ones look like they're going to be moving forward, or if they might have to slide into the next year.
Yeah, and this is a good period in time to state that If your project is here, it's programmed to be obligated this year before October, right? If for any reason you do not feel your project that's on this list will be obligated before October, please start talking to Court and myself so that we can adjust the tip and ensure that the funding is available for you and your project. And so we're doing these quarterly updates based on the numbers we received both from Iowa and Nebraska DOT on what's been obligated, what has not been obligated. As of right now, all the ones in yellow have not been obligated. If you're in charge of that project and you're hearing the words, let us know. Let's start talking. That's the big point of this.
So maybe this is more of a up at the end, but Omaha, does anybody have any comments about Levi Carter Park Trail? I only ask because usually that translates to a cost share request to us, and so if it's gonna be obligated, I would assume that would comes into a request was. Does anybody have that?
So I've been working with Omaha on that project, and it's in kind of a. So with Dennis Breyer's retiring, they're trying to, figure out who's gonna be handling this project. So there's movement on it, but I don't know necessarily if it's going to be obligated. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but I am in talks with Parks about it, so.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Any further discussion on that?
We have two more programs, sorry.
Yeah,
We have TAP and CRP.
I'll show you the TAP balance again, so nothing's been obligated, in Iowa or Nebraska yet for the alternatives program. We've got about 1.2 million in Iowa and 5.3 in, 1.8 million in Iowa, 5.3 in Nebraska. Once again, a listing of the projects that we are anticipating will end up going to be obligated this year, most of them being kind of preliminary phases. Questions on TAP? And the carbon reduction program. Basically same story here, with the exception that we from a swap in funds with NDOT, we didn't end up with any prior year balance on the Nebraska side. They basically swapped us some CMAQ funding for the carbon reduction program funding that was about to expire. So we went ahead and made that swap. So we were able to save that funding. And then we've got two projects that are slated for preliminary phases this year.
The committee talked about that, so that swap is finalized and done on the start everybody. Yep. Okay, great, because we talked about that quite a bit, so that's not that good recommendation.
And the original recommendation came from NDOT. We thought it made sense, so we worked with them. But that's all I have.
Okay. So now we are moving on to MK. And is it my understanding, Mike, that you're presenting this?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a change in program. Mike Helderson, you are presenting the state and federal policy update.
So I'm not gonna go through each of these, but we had some good discussion last month about some of the actions in the legislature in both states. So what I'll offer is we can send this list out afterwards. I'll touch on a few of them here, but these are bills in the unicameral that touch on things related to transportation or traffic safety that our legislative committee is at least monitoring. We provided comment letters on a couple of these. I'll allude to those. But kind of a wide variety of things. LB 23 bike share grant programs, and when we wrote a letter of support for this project, we noted that 80% of bike share trips in Nebraska actually occur within our metro area. There's a number of jurisdictional partnerships, whether that's Omaha or Bellevue, Papillion, and soon to be La Vista, that are partnering with our bike share provider on that. So there'd be a benefit. A couple of other things just to highlight here, LB 35. This is really about technology and the source of those technologies, in particular from hostile nations like China in and around off Air Force Base. It also references electric vehicle charging equipment. So for communities or partners that are looking at EV chargers, this will be likely a regulatory framework that you'll have to take into account as you're sourcing those different things. 10 miles for Offutt, you drop in with a very large part of our regional law jurisdictions caught up in that as well. So something to be on the lookout for. The 18 Municipalities Act, the LB 291, so kind of an infrastructure grant program. It's pretty interesting in its framework, really focused on redevelopment, which I thought was of particular interest to the Napa regions. We had a good discussion of LB 337 last month about ATVs and UTVs on county highways in particular, and allowing those as a use. LB 449, I think there's folks in this room that testified on behalf of that project. It would change the allocation of NDOT funds by district and change some things around prioritization of those funds. MAPA wrote a comment letter on this, really emphasizing the work that's in progress with MTIS and with TRIPS, and that we're looking at, and really wanting to understand some of the data behind that bill before really commenting any further. And then the final two are really traffic safety bills. One that would allow automated enforcement of speeding in school and work zones. And then the second that would allow for automated red light violation enforcement. As we're coming out of Safe Streets for All, automated enforcement is one of those strategies that we want to explore further. And so for any of you that are interested in providing that comment from your basis leaders, planners, or engineers, the hearings are later in March, and we'd be happy to work with you in terms of organizing some of the response from that, just based on what we've heard through the Safe Streets for All. A lot of support from both kind of the engineering profession and law enforcement profession within this region to explore those ideas further. I would note on LB 600 in particular, there's another bill, LB 31, that talks about the use of cameras and surveillance in schools by districts. And so there's some question about whether school zones and how that would all interact. But anyway, the point there is March 28th, both of those hearings down at Lincoln. If you're interested, I can get you more information on that. But I know TTAC had some interest in providing comment letters or testifying on behalf of that. So let us know if you want to coordinate that through MAPA.
Sorry, Mike, did MAPA already submit any information related to 600 to 615, or
Not yet.
just monitor?
No, so the public hearing, we've typically run those things through our legislative committee. We meet bi-weekly. It's a subset of our board of directors. It's usually kind of a fire drill of what hearing is next week, and we can provide the comment letters at that time while the public comment period is open. These are the next ones up though that we're really looking at. So,
Yeah, because we did talk about this, was it January or December when this came up? January, yeah. And then right after that, there was a public meeting about safety on 30th Streets that referenced a study about potential corridor improvements on 30th Streets. Neighbors were very interested in short-term deliverable outcomes related to group safety on 30th Street. And the Omaha police were there and promised increased enforcement, but that comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And so the potential for a mechanism for increased enforcement without the increased, officer time and cost was interesting. However, there is very understandable concern from community members who've been disproportionately negatively impacted by enforcement in the past about automated mechanisms of enforcement, especially because the prohibition on this type of enforcement came from Omaha. So correct.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of overlapping interests there, but I do think from a technical perspective, we could talk about this. I shared that with some people at that meeting about 30th Street. There was some interest, but there was again some concern about what would this mean specifically. So I guess I'm very interested in if there was technical information that can be shared going to that hearing by people in this group.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the question. I mean, that's certainly been the question in the past when these types of proposals have been brought forward. It's sort of the benefits and burdens. How is it a citation? Is it a civil violation? What does it actually amount to? Does it impact people's criminal record? All those different things and the mechanisms. Iowa's a little bit ahead of us in terms of red light violation speed. In speed enforcement on this. I mean, it's almost a perennial topic in the legislature about how those things get tweaked, how the funding is allocated, who can provide it, all of those things. A lot of concerns, but I think it's demonstrated some benefits as well. So it's one of those things where we can learn from partners, but I think presenting at a minimum some of what we've already collected about the issues that we see with failure to yield type of crashes within intersections, the harm that's caused to people in terms of serious injuries and fatalities. I mean, that is something that there are a few other strategies other than enforcement that can really make a meaningful difference in the short term, apart from reducing speeds. And they kind of go hand in hand. North 30th Street is a good example of that, where speed limit is 30 miles per hour, people are going over 40 miles per hour, they said 80%. So a lot of issues, but enforcement needs to be a part of it, but you're right, it's very costly to have the man hours.
So, if the next TTAC meeting is March 21st, can you remind us again about the timeline for steps moving forward in order to have some kind of official inputs? Is there in between now and March 21st, or would we talk about it again on the 21st before the hearing on the 21st?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in testifying, providing a letter, and you want to reference MAPA or TTAC in any way, you want to coordinate that, just reach out to me, and I'd be happy to filter that through our legislative committee. You know, again, I mean, we meet bi-weekly, and so we kind of touch base on things that are coming up. But certainly, I'll remind everybody on March 21st that, you know, this hearing is, you know, a week out, good opportunity to get in front of policymakers on these issues. I think, you know, again, I think there's always been an interest in exploring these, I think, from the engineering and enforcement side of things, law enforcement side of things. That said, the amount of safe systems planning work, the global coordination between local and state partners on systemic safety type issues, we're at a very different place of understanding those concerns. And I think how they fit in with maybe some of the mitigating factors as well in terms of how we approach these differently than we made in the past. And then going to Iowa, I just want to make sure we touch on some of these, you know, a little bit less, go to the next slide. Thank you. You know, the big one here is SF-22, it's a hands-free bill. It's already made it out of committee, it's on the floor. And so it's moving forward. There's been a lot of support, but it's really tightening even more the use of electronic devices. You know, again, if you look at Safe Streets, you look at the states, both states have safety plans. There's a lot of concern about the use of electronic devices, and what those do. There's a joint House Senate Bill 193 that would change some regional transit districts and taxing authority related to that. There's a consolidation of levies in Iowa over the last couple of years. This would carve out kind of a new authority for more rural districts where it's unclear. I think it's really Scott County driving that because they're just under the population threshold that exists today. And then some other things here, just a changing responsibility, constitutional amendments, and then an e-bike bill as well. The SF-23, I would just note, I believe that only applies to farm crossings at grade and the responsibility there. Don't believe it impacts kind of municipal and not crossings and responsibility there. So things to monitor, but the hands-free bill seems to be the big one that from a traffic safety standpoint that's high. On the federal side, MAPA each year we go out to the National Conference of Regions. You have a handout on the table if you're interested in kind of seeing a debrief on this. A lot of it touches on infrastructure funding, a lot of it touches on things that are important to you. I'm just going to go very high level. You know, there were 2 executive orders in January that impacted the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and Inflation Reduction Act. We're still working through what the actual impact of those are, whether they will impact discretionary awards with the MAPA, whether they impact programs that exist today. We have a hard review by OMB that was stopped by the courts, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. We're in that review period still about what the full impact of that will be. One thing that may not be on your radar, but I think for stakeholders in this room is incredibly important, is that the budget reconciliation process that's going on right now that's looking at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. One of the things that was used to offset those tax cuts the last time was the tax exempt status of municipal bonds. And what we heard from national partners is that nobody stood up and said tax exempt municipal bonds are important. I think they're incredibly important. And so we want to make sure that if any people in this room use debt financing bonds to deliver projects, that you want to make your voice known, and that those funds, that tax exempt status should not be used to offset other tax cuts. Because it's a very large number when you add it all up. It's something, you know, on the order of $800 billion. That's a nice round number that matches what tax cuts are being proposed. This national consortium of builtbybonds.com is the League of Cities, it's NACO, it's APWA, and the Government Finance Officers Associations. They basically created a form that you can go and drop down and say, we did a project here, we used debt financing bonds to deliver this. NIPA has already gone in and showed how they're using housing bonds to deliver projects across the state. So it's open, you're able to go use it, populate it, and tell the story of what's happening in Nebraska and Iowa if you're interested in that. Transportation reauthorization, just some of the highlights of what we heard from the congressional staffers, what they're looking at as they're getting into the bipartisan infrastructure law. You know, I think one of the kind of key overarching pieces is really addressing the long-term solvency of the highway trust fund, starting there and then iterating out from what do we prioritize these funds. A lot of interest in shifting discretionary grants to more formula-based programs. We'll see what happens there, but you can see here in terms of some of the other pieces, a lot of focus on innovation, a lot of focus on efficiency. As always, looking at ways of speeding up project delivery and procurement. But so I think the overarching thing is that the IIJA had a large amount of funds transferred from the general fund to prop up many of those discretionary programs. That is not really imagined by Congress at this point, that there will be that large influx. So it'll be a little bit more about the long-term funding strategy for the highway trust fund, using what's available rather than looking for those one-time transfers that they have there. So smaller bill overall, how that impacts other programs, we're going to stay on top of it as the Senate really works through reauthorization here for the next year. NEPA, I can't even tell you how many court challenges and cases have impacted NEPA over the last 6 months. I would just say, though, there was a decision out of the DC Circuit about a month ago that vacated the Council of Environmental Quality guidance and regulations nationwide that is subject to a challenge. But what we heard from a panel of K Street lobbyists who talked about it for about an hour and a half is that it is likely that there will be agency-specific guidance for NEPA without that backbone of CEQ guidance to draw from. There are likely to be more challenges on controversial projects, whether that permeates things that happen in Nebraska and Iowa. We don't know, maybe, but things may get faster up front on the NEPA approval, but we are anticipating that there will be more important challenges. And then the backside, this is really the capital visits that happen. We're really just talking about our programs and our impact. Got some information on EDA if that's interesting to any of you as well, but a lot going on. You know, we don't typically come back with this many items to keep your eye on, but wanted to put these in front of you all just in case you had interest in learning more. Happy to give you a more detailed brief if you're interested.
Like tying your first point about uncertainty on funding availability back to the projects that were set for obligation this year. We have 2 listed there, and I will say that initiating a project, a federal aid project, with the uncertainty of whether or not it will go from design into construction makes it much more difficult to want to jump into that on the front end. And especially with the TAP CRP funding being more likely to have challenges to their support at federal level. I guess when we have the meetings in the next couple of months to review the projects that have been submitted, if you have any additional information about that, it would be very helpful to know as much as possible about, is there a likelihood that funding for those programs will be decreased? Because again, initiating either of the 2 projects that we have on the list, and I assume others have the same concern. You know, it's a long lead time, 6 months, a year to get into a contract to start the design. And then after that, if funding is going to be available to take it to construction, are we on the hook for the design funding? Because projects still get built, you owe back what you spent locally, or the project also doesn't get built. And either of those are very bad outcomes. So getting into a project with NDOT that can't get to completion is much more difficult if there's uncertainty about whether or not there's going to be funding to get it to the end.
Yeah. I would say 2 things. I mean, 3 things. The first part is that, well, you know, the cone of uncertainty started out very wide and it's getting slightly narrower. What we have heard is that formula programs like those that flow through SDBG or are set aside with SDBG, like CRP, like TAP, those feel relatively safe. I think DOTs, NHPP, those kind of formula programs, save for them, the electric vehicle program that was called out, carved out, ended largely for all intents and purposes now. And so we feel confident about the dollars that are programmed today. Those assume the IIJA level of investment for those programs going forward. That's all subject to reauthorization, right? And so, or continuing resolutions or whatever we go through here over the next year or 2. Your broader point about starting projects and uncertainty, we'll tell you what we know when we know it. I can't really tell you what reauthorization is going to look like. I think in terms of, you know, having a strong base of formula programs, I don't think that's relevant anywhere. What that funding level looks like, if we're truly going to address the solvency of the highway trust fund, I don't know. I mean, that would be a difficult gap to close without some innovation. It's one of the things they want to do. So we'll see there. I would say that on your third point, the IIJA did eliminate the project development rule. So there is no longer a requirement that project advance from, one phase to the next within 10 years. With the implication being that to pay back those funds. Now, that's in there. I don't know that anybody's tested that yet, but that is in there as an efficiency to, kind of this overall piece. So it's a mixed bag, whether that stays in reauthorization. I don't know, but what I can just tell you is we're monitoring it closely. We've got, there was a period there where I was getting about 50 emails a day from national associations with updates just on what everybody was hearing. And so we've got a strong network of national partners that are keeping us up to date. That said, there's still a lot of uncertainty about what this all ends up to. I think reauthorization, though, is a very important thing for us to be closely engaged on, because I think Nebraska and Iowa both do a good job of working collaboratively to deliver projects. And I think, where we can find efficiencies in that process, I think that one is sort of. Thank you. Talk about this.
Mike, on the Nebraska side, there's a hearing on Monday, I believe it's on 5:22. The city of Omaha is going to go in opposition, I believe it does in opposition. That's related to funding of utility infrastructure moves related to projects. The bill is basically pushing the cost of the utility moves onto the agency leading the project. So that's another additional check.
Okay, yeah, we'll monitor that. I hadn't really flagged that. Thank you.
That increases your project costs. A lot.
Is there,
But does that impact franchise agreement? Is there maintenance agreement?
It's written.
including the ledger?
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
All right, we'll add that to the list. That's not one that we had flagged for. Okay, that's all I have. I don't know who's running this meeting now. I guess I could. Member agency updates. Start with the Great City list.
Nothing today. The West Grand project that was listed there for obligation, we have a bid letting next month, so shouldn't be a problem.
We'll be on.
I'm not a member agency, but no, I'm just glad to be here. I see some faces that I recognize. I was getting a little cabin fever, so I was doing a Google search, see where there was transportation meetings. So, all right, I welcome that invite. Thank you.
Pavilion, we got, we're underway under contract for the SDPG project 6 in Portal. Really in infancy of that, but we at least got survey scheduled, so that'll start the process. And we are designing the whole stretch, even though we kind of did segments for the grant funding. So, and then just local traffic, got a heads up, 84th Street, we do have a main break right in front of City Hall, which is really fun. So we have it down to 1 lane northbound, but starting Sunday, we're gonna dig that up now that the weather's turning. So we'll have head-to-head traffic from about 5th Street to 2nd Street downtown Pavilion. So avoid that if possible for about a week until we can get that fixed and report back. So
Like you said, the Portal 6, that's 72nd all the way to 108 Giles. The whole thing contract designed simultaneously, so.
So Mike's leading this one. I want to say yes, but we might have broke out the portion that would be La Vista's. Maybe Joe, on that west is 96. Did we do design for that one, or we wait for design?
Stops at 96.
Okay, so 96 to 72nd design.
Thank you.
Right.
I don't see Morris Hitchy in the room, so I'll just mention 480 will be closed this weekend. So if you're planning on passing under Harney Street, try to stay away a little bit farther. But if you do, you might be a little slower going.
What about passing over?
Yeah, you can still pass over if you have the means.
I was gonna cover that if it wasn't brought up.
Okay.
Morris gave me the list and I'm not gonna be as long-winded.
That's the only one I'll mention.
Yeah, not federal projects, but Beltline Trail Phase 3A at 40 Hamilton tree clearing is under construction. Grading will be next. That's on our own railroad corridor. Another railroad corridor, the Sorensen project, that leads to the federal aid project. Also moving to tree clearing on Monday, so doing that while we can while it's winter. And then Beltline Phase 4 will be awarded next month, and then construction in the summer. So lots of trails being constructed, lots of places. And then adjacent update. OPPD tracks electric vehicle deployments and quarterly, and between the third quarter of 24 and the fourth quarter of 2024, there was a 10% increase in the total number of electric vehicles. So as we're looking at deployment of infrastructure to support that, that's 10% in 1 quarter, and 1 quarter is kind of a rough way to track things, but I guess the indication there would be that there is an acceleration of deployment of electric vehicles on the personal level. So when will they be here? When do we need to be prepared for infrastructure to support them? That is happening more rapidly over time. So just a heads up that that's in OPD service territory. I'm not sure about the rest of the state, but unfortunate that some of the funding for infrastructure to support that is not available, because we will need more infrastructure sooner to meet that growing demand, and the demand is accelerating. Thanks.
No. Just to follow up on a theme that Mike kind of introduced, in the OT perspective, we'll share what we know, but there's a lot we don't know. We got verbal update from Federal Highway Nebraska Division yesterday, I think, that all STIP chip amendments will be going clear to headquarters rather than being approved at the local division office level. We don't know how long that'll last. We don't know how long that'll take. We don't know what the overall impacts there will be. We know it could have a potential implication for auditors redistribution. So our leadership, our program team will be working with MAPA, all of you, try to reduce that impact, that stress as much as we can, but that is what it is right now.
Touching on Morris's projects, I'm not too familiar with the active projects for NDOT. We do have some March startups, the I-480 bridges, some of the MTIS work that we have on I-4 or I-80 over by Q to Giles and Highway 50. Those will be starting up this spring. We do have some active high mast tower work on I-680 right now. We're replacing some high mast towers, knocking them down and putting new ones up. Other than that, can't think of anything else. We do have some projects that were punted recently with some restructuring, budget cuts, primarily bridge related. Some of our higher profile bridges like 72nd and L, those are untouched. Elkhorn Viaduct made the cut. That got pushed a year to 2080. But
Okay. Derek, no. Okay, go to the back then.
We have a couple of projects that are in the make right now. We've been working on all of the stretches along Platts Mill or Platteview Road, and that's taken up a lot of money. So they're pretty limited on these other items. The Lost Rail, which is the very nice executive golf course, said that they didn't need any help to pay for any other uses of just keeping it gray or gravel. And the reason behind that was they only have 150 people playing. So we got them to talk to, and turned it now we're going to spend about $5 million to get one golf course that can be essentially probably more people now, 200 possible in the number. I don't belong to it currently. Could have negotiated, but I've had money taking some of that games. That's about it. It's been real slow since the cold winter.
I wouldn't, maybe they should have just increased the green skis or something.
Yeah, be great, yeah. They didn't volunteer any money, for sure.
Austin?
Thanks, Brian, for this one, just kind of to add to that. Marty Street is closed, will be closed for the rest of the year at the crossing over 480. Farnham is a small course, it's kind of fun. But definitely go to Blackstone, Blackstone's open, that crossing is open, it's a little difficult to get around. We have parking garages, so just want to make sure everybody knows that remains open, support the businesses there if you can. We do have a full closure coming up on Farnham, I believe it starts next week at 33rd for some sewer work. That's about a 3-week closure, full closure, so right now we have just a westbound lane open, fully closed for a short period of time, get some sewer work done in the middle of the intersection. I don't want to talk about big Bob.
So this is 2 months of promises.
At some point in time, I feel.
By June?
I think I'll get fired. Yeah.
Okay, just, I think people notice in June.
Somebody's getting fired. Other than that, I think, we did get to go ahead for our NTP for design and NEPA work on North 24th Street, the ID streetscape, so that's well, that's good, very good project for us. And, you haven't been to 168, that turned out to be a great project, so good looking forward. It's all fully open now, so all things are good.
Going back to 480, do you guys know what the game plan is this weekend? I had a couple of questions from our Dom asking what the details were.
It shuts down at 9 o'clock tonight, it opens back up at 6 o'clock.
What's the demolition method? I saw an army of excavators out there. Are they?
Excavators, saws, so it'll be cut.
Okay, so it's not like blowing it up, not dropping it. Okay.
You sound like a reporter's at times.
Barb might know details.
Not that cool.
She's been out sick with kids, so I haven't been able to poke her and ask her.
It's easy to eat it out, but by the time.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Anybody else in the back row? Okay. Anybody online have any updates for a member agency?
I think Madison Avenue westbound off ramp was going to be closed today for girder deliveries, and I think it might be opened back up by now. But other than that, that's the only project really going on right now in the metro.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
There is one thing I wanted to bring up. Do we have a representative from Bellevue here?
Not
here today.
present. I don't know if anybody, I don't remember them announcing themselves online. Anybody from Bellevue online? 679.
There was a closure notification that I got about a week ago about Fort Crook Road by K Park, between K Park and Fairview. I was just curious of the details on that. As far as I knew, one direction of Fort Crook was completely closed, the other direction was under review. Fort Crook might be completely closed and detoured to alternate routes, likely 75, but.
Fort Crook Road South has been closed and detoured for a number of weeks now.
I just didn't know, it was dropped on us and I didn't know the details.
Yeah. They were going to inspect both segments. And reach inspection in January. I don't know if that's happened. I don't, not speaking to Bellevue, but I live today, would like to see if that here is there.
So I just gave our SLC a heads up that in case we have some projects, depending on how long-term that closure is, depending on the volume of traffic that impacts. We do have some overlapping projects in that area where we're gonna have some ramp closures, if that's going to inconvenience some traffic, especially if they're fully detoured.
And they're breaking ground on the swimming pool in one. South. 34.
You want me to connect you with them?
I have contact information. I was just curious if they had any additional information.
Sure.
All right. Well, the only other additional business I'll add to the list of future events and meetings would be March 12th, we're doing our MAPA, get these guys. I didn't even look at this slide there. Archibald Ross, in Dongan from Accelerator for America. If you follow infrastructure investment and innovation, they're a national leader in terms of bringing communities together with federal partners. They've been a partner on some of our thriving communities work. So Ross is going to give us an update of wherever we are. At the March 12th, you know, it's I think 2 days before we need some sort of budget action on a continuing resolution. So it should be interesting, but it'll be timely. I was prepared to kind of give you whatever the latest and greatest update is. So if you're interested in hearing about regional infrastructure investment, more on these federal updates, that'll be a great opportunity to join us at the old mattress factory. So we're going to have it here in kind of North downtown. So please join us. All right. And with that, any other updates? Otherwise, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Second. Well, I'll take yours as the motion. Robert's rules, we don't need a set, so you're all just.